So this is the new chain tensioner. Genuine Mercedes. These things are not cheap. Not cheap at all. As a matter of fact, there's your pricing. There's the list, $358, and that's what I paid for it. This is who I bought it from. Now you can purchase this cheaper. As I said, I'm replacing a Febi Bilstein. There is a rumor, or there's confirmation. There's people out there where this has failed with under 15,000 miles, these Febis. They're the mid-grade one. This is, you know, for example, here in Auto House, it's $82, but you can buy them even cheaper than that. You know, here's Euro parts, for example, for $50. I'm not gonna risk it by installing a used Febi. In virtually all my videos, I have this statement. This is the way that I did it. It might not be the way you do it. In this particular case, I'm actually gonna follow the manual. The car has been sitting for a long period of time, so there's no tension in the tensioner because it's hydraulic tensioner. Just like your compensating elements, those are hydraulic. And after your car sits for a while, that hydraulic pressure naturally leaks out. That's the reason why when you first start your car, it's noisy. Mainly because your hydraulic lifters are not charged, your chain tensioner is not tight, because all those things there work on hydraulic pressure. So it takes no more than a couple seconds actually. Here's the reason why I do not preload it. Number one, the manual doesn't tell you to preload it. Number two, it's hydraulic. After time and your vehicle sits, if you go, let's say you go on vacation for a month or whatever, and your car sits there. A lot of you guys are running these classic vehicles and you only drive them in the summertime and they sit all winter long. What are you doing when you do your first cold start? Probably nothing. You're just going in there, starting it up. It sounds a little bit loud at first and then everything quiets down within seconds. If it doesn't quiet down, then what are you gonna do? You're gonna turn it off. See why? Because it should not take hardly any time to charge all those things. When it comes to the chain tensioner, it's actually pre-tensioned. It can handle a startup all on its own. It has enough pressure. The manual even says that. And that brings me to this document here. Removal, installation, and inspection of the chain tensioner. This is for the M116 and M117. To know whether or not your chain tensioner is functioning properly, you can run a test, just like you can run a test on any other component on your vehicle. Now, what they tell you to do is you place your chain tensioner into a vessel filled with engine oil. The chain tensioner should rest vertically in a downward direction in the oil, at least up to the flange. Then it says, actuation of the thrust bolt will fill the chain tensioner with oil coupled with simultaneous venting. Now you notice it told you it will fill up with oil. Not like it was already filled up. They don't tell you to take it out and see if it doesn't move, because they know it's not preloaded. If the engine's been sitting there for any length of time, it's not loaded anymore. Just like your compensating elements, right? Their little test is to pump it up first, and then, right, they tell you to pump the engine, turn the engine on, that's the first thing they tell you. And then they tell you to get the head of a hammer and push on each one of them. And the squishy ones are the junk ones. And the ones that held but aren't stuck are the good ones. So it's always keeping tension against this thing. So it's automatically bleeding it off. So I want to make sure, I want to confirm, you know, am I doing it right? And am I sharing the right information with my audience? That's my biggest thing. That's all I really care about. This is an email that I sent to several different places. AdSit answered me. They remanufacture engines and they specialize in Mercedes-Benz. And Joe right there answered me. Hey Tony, we don't work on cars here. However, I have sold hundreds, if not thousands, of those over the last 20 years and have never heard of anything like that. Thanks, Joe. Thousands of engines. What about Metric Motors out in California? They've been in business since 1979, and they immediately replied to me as well. Hey Tony, no preload prime required for that tensioner. It is oil pressure fed. In fact, if you do preload it, it can be really difficult to install. Thanks for checking, right? He knows that I'm a guy building my vehicle and I'm checking up. I think that's a service right there. I've never talked with Mike before, but that's Metric Motors. So you guys say, oh, those are all American companies. Well, now we're into the UK. What is the SL shop? You know, I've kind of built a relationship with a guy named Stuart over there because I have searched for parts. And that's kind of how we got together. And matter of fact, remember my exhaust manifold when I was trying to find those copper rings? Well, after I did that and I actually found and sourced that part out, I went back to the SL shop and let them know about it. And they were grateful that I did. The SL shop, what did they say? Hey, Tony, I have just checked with one of my head techs. And he said, it's fine to drain the oil out before fitting it, as it is easier to fit in. That's what I told you to do. Drain the oil and put it in because your engine is gonna pump that up just fine. Now, what are you gonna need, or what am I gonna need for the job? I'm gonna need a torque wrench, an extension, a 10 millimeter, because we've got to take off the valve cover, at least one side we have to, a 13 millimeter, I'm just gonna use a ratchet to take things apart, and then you're gonna need new crush washers for your valve covers. And of course, the chain tensioner. So let's go on over here and take the old one off. Before you decide to just start removing your chain tensioner, I would suggest that you put your engine at top dead center. If you don't know how to put it at top dead center, then there's a link in the description down below which will show you how I did it. After you've done that, the next thing I would do is remove your valve covers. At least the one on the right or passenger side. Now that you got your valve cover off, go ahead and verify your timing mark. Make sure you're lined up and that both of these lobes are pointing up. I know that the other side is also this way because I set it at top dead center with both covers off previously. And the reason why I'm just saying to do this is because no matter what happens, anything that happens at this point, you know where top dead center is. You've already got your crankshaft all set and you've got your marks here all taken care of. Once you have verified your top dead center and everything, I would recommend that you wire tie your sprocket. You don't want that thing to jump. Now we can proceed with removing the tensioner. Now before you just take these bolts out, I want to caution you because there's pressure coming out of here. This chain is pushing up against that tensioner rail, which is pushing on your tensioner. In my previous video, when I removed or when I installed this the last time, you guys probably saw how easy that was to install. And the reason why it was super easy to install is because I didn't have any rocker arms. This was free. It could move any way that it wants, so you can make sure all your slack is on the inside. But right now, right, you're on a compression stroke and everything, your lobe, it's holding this forward. So at this point, if you just take a bolt out, start taking bolts out, you could strip this. I would say 50% of the time that they strip this is on the way out, and 50% of the time is on the way in. Regardless if you have this preloaded or not preloaded. When it's not preloaded, it's still difficult because you're pushing the whole engine. This whole thing has got torque and holding tension against your tensioning rail. So to be smart and to make it easy, you've got two things you can do. You can either go ahead and remove your rocker arms, which will make this super easy. You can watch my video where I installed the other one. All I did was just push it right in with my thumb and I took it right off. So this is what I recommend you do. Start by removing one bolt. Just one. Leave the other one in there. Now take note that where this guide rail is, you see how much space there is between here and here? There's tension on there. So now what you're gonna do is you're gonna take a long full thread, and I have a nut on here and a washer because I don't wanna mark this up. So now that I've got that on there, I'm going to go ahead and thread this part in. Just like that, just hand tighten, don't tighten it. And then bring this all the way down. You can give this a little snug if you want. Now we'll remove the bottom one, do the same thing. Like I said, this is the way that I would do it. You can do it any way you want. Then go ahead and put your other one down here. These are 90 millimeters, the ones that I have. Yeah, I think 80 would probably work, but 90 is what I'm gonna do. Now I can start removing it. Give it nice and easy. Come out evenly. Make sure that you're not turning your bolts. These things here you don't want to turn. I'm able to do it with my fingers because, you know, everything is it's not charged. As a matter of fact, once I get to a certain point, I can start to release it. You can see how much tension. If we look up here and have a look, see how it's coming? So now it's loose and you can just go ahead and finish now, taking it out. Now, was that easy? Of course it was. And you had no fear stripping that block. Now I'm going to wipe this with some brake clean and get it ready for the new one. Let's go compare these chain tensioners. So this is the Febi and this is the genuine Mercedes. And it comes with a gasket, and I'm going to mention, as I did in my previous video, that this is a Victor Renz. I would say that these are virtually identical. Why the Febi fails, I'm not quite sure. I mean, I would say that they're almost from the exact same mold. One thing that looks very similar, you see the discoloration here and the discoloration here. It's a different pattern, but for some reason there is this discoloration. I don't know why. When I look at the top, I can see all these scratch marks and everything, but I mean, that doesn't matter. I'm just comparing the two. And if I look at the Febi, it has like this little dot. Can you see that little dot right there? And that's how they look this way. I would say that they are identical height-wise. And as far as being able to squish it, you can see I can squish that. The Mercedes, I would say it's virtually the same. That's how you bleed them, really. It's exactly the same as the compensating elements. So if you're ready to do an install and you pulled your old one out and it's charged, all you have to do is bleed it, just like that. And eventually all the air, you can hear it. There it is. You see that? It all dripped out. I mean, it was already dripped out, right? I'm just even doing it more. So now it is identical as far as tension. There's nothing wrong with this tensioner at this point. Now the one difference, of course, is the color of the pin. You'll notice this is shiny and this is not. But I would suspect the biggest difference here is the inside. All right, this is all clean, verified that everything's in good shape. The next thing is I want to install the gasket. The gasket has writing on it on one side and no writing on the other side. The writing will face this way. Now before I put this on here, I like to coat this a little bit with some oil on both sides. That's how I like to do it. All right, a little bit of oil on there. You don't have to do it that way. This is just my way. The manual doesn't say to do it that way. I just do, And now I am ready to install it. My air compressor just was delivered, you know, day late, right? And it's not great. It's a name brand DeWalt, but it's missing important parts. I can't even run it. So yeah, that's the way the world is these days. Everything I purchase is junk. So again, I have these long bolts in there, and I'm just gonna go ahead and get those bolts started. There we go. Now you want to make sure that your pin is lining up on your pin on the inside, like that. I can look inside there and I can see that pin. You can't see it from that angle, but you can see how the rail itself is all the way up against the block. And that's the reason why you got to do it this way. So just kind of tension it up, bring your bolts in. I mean, come on, how hard is this, right? Look how easy this is. Why would you want to preload it? I've taken my gloves off because it's just a lot easier to load it this way. Little by little, you can see how that's away from it now, so it's got the tension on there. I'm just about sealed up here. So now I'm going to remove just the one right here. And then we'll put the real bolt in. You see that that's only how much thread that thing is. That's why, you know, can you imagine if you had all that tension like that going on there to pull it out? You're gonna strip it on the way out. I'll snug that just a little bit. Not tighten, of course, just a little snug. Now I'm gonna pull out the bottom one. I'm not saying you can't preload it. If you feel compelled to do so, then go right ahead. I'm just saying you don't have to. I've done this before. I've done it twice, actually. You know, before I took the engine out. The first thing I did when I purchased this vehicle was to go ahead and do all the guide rails and the chain and the sprockets. All that was done at that time. The manual says 25 Newton meters. I'm going to set mine for 23. And the reason why I go 23 is because I can go 25 later if it leaks. This thing has leaked before. The first time I did this, it leaked. I'm not sure if I used a genuine Mercedes at the time, gasket. The second time I did it, I installed a Mercedes-Benz and it didn't leak. So by going 23, and if it leaks, then I can go 2 more Newton meters later. I'm gonna go like 10, you know, there's 5.5, for example. And I'm going to do the other one at 5.5. Or 6. How's that? How about 6? And then I'm going to go 10, 15, maybe 18, and then 23. How's that? And you guys can see my final torque. On my final torque, .3, and that one's actually 24. Let's take my mark to say that it was torqued. You can see that the guide rail is up. I can actually look down inside. You guys can't quite see that. But I can see that my pin is resting up against the stop that's on the tensioner itself. Verify that the timing mark is right on the money. Now I'll cut this off. No way it's going to lift off of there. No way, you guys. No way. All on its own. The spring that is inside of that tensioner is enough to take care of all that. There's the timing mark on the driver's side, and there's the timing mark for the damper pulley. Right on the money. So before you put your valve covers on this thing, the best thing you can do is turn the engine over twice. Get a full cycle on this so you can check your guide and make sure that that tensioner guide is moving freely and you know that everything's working good. So let's do that. So this is the left or driver's side, and there's the right side. And here's a split view. Let's turn it. Of course, it's going to be a lot easier if you take your spark plugs out. There's once around. So once around, these lobes are down now. There we are. Let's check our marks. This is the right side, and this is the left side. And this is the damper pulley. Everything lines up perfectly. So there it is. It's all done. Valve covers are all back on. Everything's looking good. Now, if you put your tensioner in there and you preloaded it, when you installed it, you probably just bled it, but you went through all that trouble of trying to install a preloaded tensioner. You saw how easy this was, right? It was easy to take off and it was easy to put on. It's also easy to bleed out. Well, that's about it, you guys. I think for now, I just gotta say, thanks again for watching.